I inherited Grandma's house only to find they sold it without asking. My lawyer said, they skipped a crucial clause. Having you here listening to me means a lot. Watch until the end and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm really curious to see how far my story is reaching. I stood frozen in the middle of the lawyer's office, my breath caught in my throat as Mr. Bennett slid the document across his mahogany desk. The words blurred before my eyes, but one sentence stood out in stark clarity. The property at 1423 Maple Avenue has been sold. That's impossible, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. That was Grandma's house. That was my house. Mr. Bennett adjusted his glasses, his expression a mixture of concern and discomfort. Lindsay, I'm afraid the sale was processed 3 weeks ago. Your father and brother signed all the necessary paperwork. My hands trembled as I stared at the document. Grandma had always told me the Victorian house with the wraparound porch would be mine someday. The house where I'd spent every summer growing up, helping her tend to her rose garden and baking pies in her sun-drenched kitchen. The house she'd promised me in her will. There must be some mistake, I insisted, looking up at Mr. Bennett. Grandma left that house to me. I have the will right here. I fumbled through my purse, pulling out the folded document I'd kept close since her funeral 6 months ago. Mr. Bennett sighed, taking the paper from my shaking hands. Your family provided an updated will, Lindsay. They claimed your grandmother changed her mind shortly before she passed. My stomach dropped. That's a lie. I was with her every day during her last months. She never mentioned changing her will. I'd put my life on hold to care for Grandma. I'd taken leave from my job, spent nights sleeping in the chair beside her bed, held her hand through the worst of the pain. My parents had visited maybe twice a month, always with excuses about being too busy. My brother, Jake, hadn't even bothered to show up for her funeral. I need to talk to my family, I said, standing abruptly. The room seemed to spin around me. 20 minutes later, I pulled into my parents' driveway, my tires screeching against the asphalt. Dad was in the garage, tinkering with his vintage car as always. Lindsay? What are you doing here? He asked, barely looking up from the engine. You sold Grandma's house, I said flatly. It wasn't a question. His hands stilled momentarily before continuing to work. We did what was necessary. Necessary? That house was mine. Grandma left it to me. Mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Sweetie, your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly near the end. She updated her will to leave the house to the family, not just you. The casual way she lied to my face made my blood boil. That's not true. I was there every day. She never changed her will. Jake's expensive SUV pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, looking annoyed at finding me there. What's going on? They sold Grandma's house, I said, turning to face him. The house she left to me. Jake shrugged, his expression indifferent. The house needed too much work, Lindsay. It was falling apart. We got a good offer. How much? I demanded. My parents exchanged glances. That's not really your concern, Dad said dismissively. Not my concern. It was my house. My voice broke, tears threatening to spill over. Don't be so dramatic, Mom sighed. We're family. What's good for the family is good for you too. Jake smirked. Besides, it's done. Papers are signed. New owners move in next week. I stood there, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me, feeling completely alone. They had stolen what was rightfully mine, not just a house, but a connection to the only person who had truly cared about me. I'm going to fight this, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. Grandma wanted me to have that house. Dad finally looked up from the car. Don't be stupid, Lindsay. You can't afford a legal battle. And who would believe you over us? Jake added with a cruel smile. 3 against 1, sis. I turned and walked back to my car, my whole body numb. As I drove away, I called Mr. Bennett. "I need to know if there's anything I can do," I said when he answered. "They lied about Grandma changing her will." "I know they did." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Come back to my office tomorrow morning," he finally said. "There's something you should know about your grandmother's will. Something your family either missed or deliberately ignored." "What is it?" I asked, hope flickering in my chest for the first time. "A clause," he replied. "A crucial clause they overlooked." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, tears streaming down my face as I drove toward my small apartment. The house where I'd felt most at home, where I'd been truly happy, had been stolen from me by my own family. But maybe, just maybe, Grandma had found a way to protect me even after she was gone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma's house, the weathered blue paint, the white trim around the windows, the porch swing where we'd sit for hours as she told me stories about her youth. By morning, my eyes were puffy and my head pounded, but I was at Mr. Bennett's office the moment it opened. "Thank you for coming back," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much either. "I've been reviewing your grandmother's will thoroughly." "And?" My voice caught in my throat. Mr. Bennett slid a document across the desk. "This is the original will, notarized and witnessed. Your family presented an altered version, but I kept the original in my records." He pointed to a paragraph near the bottom of the page. "This clause specifically states that the house at 1423 Maple Avenue is left to you, Lindsay Marie Carter, with the condition that it cannot be sold without your express written consent for a period of 20 years following your grandmother's death." I read the paragraph 3 times, my hands shaking. So they had no right to sell it? Not legally, no. Mr. Bennett removed his glasses. "This is a serious matter, Lindsay. Your family forged documents and potentially committed fraud." A mix of emotions washed over me: vindication, anger, sadness. "What happens now?" "We file an injunction to stop the new owners from taking possession and petition the court to void the sale." He hesitated. "But I should warn you, this won't be easy. Your family has resources, and they'll fight back." "I don't care," I said, a steely resolve forming in my chest. That house is all I have left of her. As I drove to work, I'd already used up most of my sick days caring for Grandma. Memories flooded back. I'd spent every summer with her from age 8, when my parents decided they were too busy for a child underfoot during school breaks. At first, it felt like being abandoned, but soon those summers became the highlight of my year. Grandma taught me how to garden, how to bake, how to mend clothes, practical skills my mother never bothered with. But more importantly, she taught me about resilience. "Life isn't always fair, sweet pea," she'd tell me. "But you can't let that steal your joy." I remembered one particular summer when I was 16. My parents had just informed me they were going to Europe for a month, without me, of course. I'd arrived at Grandma's house in tears. "They don't want me around," I'd sobbed on her shoulder. Grandma had held me close. "Their loss," she'd said firmly. "Some people don't recognize the treasure right in front of them." Later that evening, we'd sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance across the yard. "This house has been in our family for generations," she'd told me. "One day, it'll be yours. A place that's completely yours, where no one can make you feel unwanted." The memory brought fresh tears to my eyes as I pulled into the hospital parking lot. Grandma had kept her promise, she'd left me the house. It was my family who had broken faith. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Got a call from Bennett. Drop this nonsense now." I ignored it and headed inside to start my shift. By lunchtime, I had 3 missed calls from my mother and 2 from my father. I silenced my phone and focused on my patients. When I finally checked my voicemail after work, my mother's voice rang with false concern. "Lindsay, honey, we're worried about you. This obsession with your grandmother's house isn't healthy. She changed her mind before she died. You were just too emotional to remember it clearly. Call us back. We want to help you." The manipulation was so transparent it made me sick. I was tempted to delete the message, but instead, I saved it. Evidence of their lies might prove useful. The next day, I met with Mr. Bennett again. He'd drafted the legal documents to contest the sale. "I've also requested the original of this supposed updated will," he said. "Your family's attorney has been evasive." "They know it's fake," I said. "Most likely." He paused. "I should tell you that I received a call from your father." He implied that pursuing this would damage family relationships beyond repair. I laughed bitterly. "What family? They've made it clear where I stand." That evening, I drove past Grandma's house. A "sold" sign stood in the yard. I parked across the street, just looking at the place that should have been my home. The roses Grandma and I had planted were still blooming along the front walkway. Would the new owners care for them, or would they tear them out, erasing another piece of her? As the sun set, casting long shadows across the lawn, I made a silent promise to Grandma. I would fight for the house she wanted me to have. I would stand up to my family's betrayal. My phone rang, my father again. This time, I answered. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "You need to stop this, Lindsay." His tone was authoritative, the same one he'd used when I was a child. "You're embarrassing the family." "The family?" I repeated. "The same family that stole my inheritance? That forged documents? That lied to my face? We did what was best." "For who?" I cut him off. "Not for me. Not for Grandma, whose wishes you ignored. The money from the sale is going toward Jake's new business venture," he said, as if that justified everything. "It's an investment in the family's future." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. They hadn't just stolen my house, they'd sold it to fund Jake's latest get-rich-quick scheme. "My future doesn't matter?" I asked quietly. The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "I'll see you in court," I said, and hung up. "We should all sit down and discuss this like adults," my mother said over the phone, her voice suddenly conciliatory after days of ignored calls. Sunday brunch. The whole family. I knew it was a trap, but I agreed anyway. Maybe a small part of me still hoped they would acknowledge what they'd done, that there would be some path to resolution that didn't involve lawyers and courtrooms. That hope died the moment I walked into my parents' dining room on Sunday. They were all there, Mom, Dad, Jake, and even his wife, Melissa, who'd always treated me with thinly veiled contempt. The table was set with Mom's best china, a spread of food that looked perfect but would taste bland, just like our family's veneer of normalcy. "Lindsay," Dad said, gesturing to the only empty chair. "Let's eat." I remained standing. "I'd rather talk about why you sold Grandma's house first." Jake rolled his eyes. "Are you still on about that?" "It's done." "Not legally," I replied. "Mr. Bennett filed the injunction yesterday." The facade of pleasantness cracked. Dad's face hardened. "Sit down, Lindsay." I slid into the chair, my back rigid. Mom passed the eggs, smiling as if we were having a normal family meal. "These turned out just perfect, don't you think?" "You forged documents," I said flatly. "You lied about Grandma changing her will." Melissa snorted softly. "Always so dramatic." "It wasn't forgery," Dad countered. "Your grandmother verbally expressed different wishes before she died." "That's not true," I said, my voice rising. "I was with her every day. She never said anything about changing her will." "You were emotional, honey," Mom said, patting my hand in a way that made my skin crawl. "Grief affects memory." I pulled my hand away. "I'm not the one lying here." Jake slammed his fork down. "Enough. Do you know how selfish you sound? That old house was falling apart. I needed capital for my business, a business that will support this family for generations. What were you going to do with it? Lie there alone with your cats?" "It was mine," I said, tears threatening. Grandma wanted me to have it. What Grandma wanted doesn't matter anymore, Dad said coldly. What matters is what's best for this family. And I'm not family? Mom sighed dramatically. Of course you are, but you've always been different. You don't think about the bigger picture. The bigger picture being Jake's business? I asked. Premier Tech Solutions is going to be huge, Jake said, puffing out his chest. Dad and I have been planning this for years. The house sale was the final piece we needed. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Years? You've been planning to sell Grandma's house for years? Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. We didn't know she'd leave it specifically to you. That complicated things. So you just decided to ignore her wishes? I stared at them in disbelief. To forge documents? We did what was necessary, Jake said dismissively. And honestly, Lindsay, what would you even do with a house like that? You can barely manage your rent on a nurse's salary. The property taxes alone would bankrupt you. That wasn't your decision to make. Well, we made it anyway, Jake sneered. And no judge is going to side with you over us. We've already talked to the Richardsons. They've donated to Judge Pearson's campaigns for years. You're trying to rig the case? I whispered, horrified. We're being practical, Dad said sternly. Now, you have two options. Drop this lawsuit nonsense and we'll give you $10,000 from the sale as a gesture of goodwill. Or continue with this pointless fight, spend money you don't have on legal fees, and get nothing. I stood up slowly, my appetite gone. You really don't care about me at all, do you? Mom looked genuinely confused. Of course we care, honey. That's why we're trying to help you see reason. The house is already sold, Jake added. Randall Monroe bought it. You know, the developer? He's tearing it down next month for a new strip mall. My heart nearly stopped. Tearing it down? Progress, Dad said with a shrug. The neighborhood's changing. I looked at each of their faces, Mom's practiced concern, Dad's stern authority, Jake's smug superiority, Melissa's bored indifference. These people were strangers to me. I'm leaving, I said quietly. And I'm not dropping the lawsuit. Jake laughed. Good luck with that, little sister. You always were the family disappointment. As I walked to the door, Mom called after me. Lindsay, don't be like this. Family should stick together. I turned back one last time. This isn't family. This is just people who happen to share DNA. I drove straight to Grandma's house, the house that should have been mine. Parked in the driveway was a sleek black Mercedes with a vanity plate that read Monroe. My chest tightened. The new owner was there. I sat in my car across the street, watching as a man in an expensive suit emerged from the house, talking loudly on his phone about development timelines and demolition permits. This man was going to destroy the only place I'd ever felt truly at home. And my family had handed him the wrecking ball. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they should have as I climbed them beside Mr. Bennett. 2 weeks had passed since that disastrous family brunch, 2 weeks of ignored calls, veiled threats, and sleepless nights. Remember, Mr. Bennett said quietly, stay calm no matter what they say. Judge Pearson values decorum. I nodded, clutching my purse where I kept Grandma's reading glasses, a small talisman of strength. Inside the courtroom, I spotted my family immediately. They sat together on one side, my father in an expensive suit, my mother wearing pearls, Jake looking smugly confident. Beside them was a sharp-looking attorney I recognized from billboards around town, Catherine Reeves, known for representing wealthy clients and rarely losing. Randall Monroe, the developer who had bought Grandma's house, sat behind them, scrolling through his phone as if this were an inconvenient meeting rather than a battle for my inheritance. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Pearson entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s. The hearing began with Reeves arguing smoothly that my grandmother had changed her will verbally before her death, making the written document outdated. She painted me as an emotional young woman unable to accept reality, clinging to a house I couldn't afford to maintain. When Mr. Bennett presented the clause requiring my consent for any sale, Reeves countered that the updated will had nullified that clause. It was a masterful performance of half-truths and manipulations. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett said, we request time to examine this supposed updated will. My client was the primary caregiver for her grandmother during her final months and insists no such changes were discussed. Judge Pearson nodded. I'll grant 2 weeks for discovery. In the meantime, no demolition or renovation can begin on the property. Monroe made a noise of frustration behind me, but I barely heard it. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prove my family had lied. Outside the courthouse, Jake approached me, smirking. You're only delaying the inevitable, Lindsay. Why are you doing this? I asked, genuinely wanting to understand. You never even visited Grandma when she was sick. Business is business, he shrugged. Nothing personal. But it was personal. It was deeply, painfully personal. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at a photo of Grandma and me from my college graduation. She had looked so proud, even as her health was beginning to fail. This is just the beginning, sweet pea, she told me. Your life is yours to build. A knock at my door startled me. It was Claire, my neighbor from across the hall and the closest thing I had to a friend in the building. I brought wine, she announced. You look like you need it. Over glasses of cheap Merlot, I told her everything, the house, the betrayal, the lawsuit. That's beyond messed up, Claire said, refilling our glasses. What are you going to do now? I don't know, I admitted. Their lawyer is expensive. They know the judge. They've probably destroyed any evidence that could help me. Claire considered this. What about the house itself? Is there anything there that could prove your case? I sat up straighter. Like what? I don't know. Papers? Photos? Old people keep everything. The seed of an idea took root. Grandma had been meticulous about keeping records. What if there was something in the house, something my family didn't know about? I need to get inside, I said, already formulating a plan. 2 days later, I parked a block away from Grandma's house, my heart pounding. I'd called Monroe's office, posing as a potential investor interested in his new development. His assistant confirmed he would be in meetings all afternoon. The house should be empty. I walked around to the back, to the kitchen door where Grandma had always kept a spare key hidden in a fake rock in her herb garden. Relief flooded through me when I found it still there, untouched. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Some of the furniture remained, draped in dust cloths like ghosts. I moved quickly to Grandma's bedroom, to the antique secretary desk she'd always kept locked. The small key had hung on a chain around her neck until the day she died, when she'd pressed it into my palm and whispered, for safekeeping. The desk opened with a creak. Inside were neatly organized folders, tax documents, birth certificates, old letters. My fingers trembled as I sorted through them, looking for anything that might help my case. In the bottom drawer, I found a wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside was a leather-bound book, Grandma's journal, and beneath it, a sealed envelope with my name written in her shaky handwriting. I opened it with care, unfolding several pages of notepaper covered in her distinctive script. My dearest Lindsay, it began. If you're reading this, I am gone, and you found my final gift to you. I've always known your father and brother had designs on this house. Jake approached me last Christmas, asking me to change my will. When I refused, your father joined in, both of them insisting the property would be better utilized by the family business. They didn't care that this has been my home for 60 years, or that you are the only one who truly loves it as I do. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. I've taken precautions. Along with the clause in my will requiring your consent for any sale, I've left this record of their attempts to pressure me. On the final page, you'll find a recording device. For the past year, I've recorded our conversations about the house and my wishes. The evidence is clear, I never changed my mind. The house is yours, sweet pea. Fight for it. My hands shook as I reached the end of the letter and found a small USB drive taped to the paper. Grandma, who could barely send a text message, had secretly recorded evidence to protect me from my own family. As I gathered the journal, letter, and USB drive, I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw Monroe striding up the front walk, phone to his ear. I had minutes, maybe seconds, to escape. I slipped out the back door, carefully replacing the key in its hiding spot. As I hurried down the alley behind the house, clutching the evidence to my chest, I felt Grandma's presence with me, guiding me. She'd known all along what my family might do, and she'd prepared. Now it was my turn to fight. "This changes everything," Mr. Bennett said, carefully examining the contents spread across his desk: Grandma's journal, the letter, and most importantly, the USB drive we just listened to together. Grandma's voice, though frail, had been crystal clear on the recordings. "I'm leaving the house to Lindsay, not to be sold under any circumstances without her permission," she had stated firmly to my father and brother. Their responses, pressure, arguments, even veiled threats about her mental competence, were equally clear. "Your grandmother was quite resourceful," Mr. Bennett said with admiration. These recordings prove there was no verbal amendment to the will. They also demonstrate undue influence and potential elder abuse. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks. "So we can win? We have a much stronger case now," he replied cautiously. "But your family won't back down easily." He was right. The next morning, as I arrived for my shift at the hospital, my supervisor called me into her office. "Lindsay," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "there's been a complaint about your patient care." My stomach dropped. "What? From who?" "Anonymous," she replied, but her discomfort told me she knew more than she was saying. "We have to investigate, which means you're on administrative leave until further notice." I walked out in a daze. In 5 years of nursing, I'd never received a single complaint. This was no coincidence, it had to be my family's doing. My suspicions were confirmed when I checked my mailbox at home. Inside was a note, no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Jake's: "Jobs, reputations, friendships, everything has a price. Drop the lawsuit." My phone rang. "Mr. Bennett." "Lindsay, we have a problem. Catherine Reeves has filed a motion questioning the authenticity of the recordings. They're claiming tampering." "That's ridiculous," I said, anger cutting through my fear. "They're desperate." "Yes, but it means we need a forensic audio expert, which isn't cheap." I closed my eyes, calculating my dwindling savings. With my job now in jeopardy and legal fees mounting, I was quickly approaching a financial breaking point. "I'll figure something out," I said, more confidently than I felt. That evening, Claire helped me set up a crowdfunding page. "Tell your story," she urged. "People hate injustice." I hesitated, uncomfortable with making my private pain public, but I had few options left. I wrote a brief, factual account of what had happened, careful not to include potentially slanderous claims against my family. Within hours, donations began trickling in, mostly small amounts from friends, former colleagues, and strangers touched by my situation. It wasn't enough for the expert we needed, but it was a start. 3 days before our next court date, as I was leaving my apartment for a meeting with Mr. Bennett, a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down to reveal Randall Monroe. "Miss Carter," he said smoothly. "I'd like a word." Against my better judgment, I got in. Monroe drove slowly around the block as he spoke. "This situation has become unnecessarily complicated," he said. "I'm a businessman. I like clean, efficient transactions." "The sale wasn't legal," I replied stiffly. "Perhaps not," he conceded, surprising me. "But the development is moving forward regardless. Permits are approved. Contracts have been signed. Not my problem." Monroe chuckled. "Direct. I appreciate that." He pulled over and turned to face me. "What if I offered you a compromise? Keep the house, but sell me the land behind it, about half the property." You get your grandmother's home, I get enough space for a smaller version of my development. Everyone wins. I considered it for a moment. It was tempting. I could keep the house, end the lawsuit, get my job back. What about the garden? I asked. The rose bushes my grandmother planted? Would have to go, he said with a shrug. Prime street frontage. I thought of Grandma tending those roses every morning, her wide-brimmed hat protecting her from the sun. How she'd taught me the name of each variety, how to prune them, how to coax the most vibrant blooms. No deal, I said. Monroe's pleasant demeanor cooled. Think carefully, Miss Carter. Your family has powerful connections in this town. This lawsuit could drag on for years. You could lose everything. I've already lost my family, I said. But I won't lose my grandmother's legacy too. As I got out of the car, Monroe called after me. Your family approached me about this property 8 months ago, you know. While your grandmother was still alive. They were quite eager to make a deal. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 8 months ago, Grandma had still been relatively healthy, only beginning to decline. They had been planning this betrayal even then. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of notifications on my phone. My crowdfunding page had exploded overnight. A local news station had picked up my story, Nurse Fights Family Over Grandmother's Stolen Inheritance, and donations were pouring in. By that afternoon, we had enough for the forensic expert and then some. Messages of support flooded my inbox, many from people sharing similar stories of family betrayal over inheritances. My phone rang, my mother. After weeks of silence, her timing was suspicious. I answered warily. Lindsay, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, what do you think you're doing? This public spectacle is humiliating the entire family. I'm fighting for what's rightfully mine, I replied. Your father is furious. The Richardsons are asking questions. Jake's business partners are concerned. You should have thought of that before you stole my house. She sighed dramatically. We raised you better than this, Lindsay. Family matters should stay private. Like how you privately forged documents. Privately pressured Grandma to change her will. Privately got me suspended from my job. There was a telling pause. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the recordings, Mom. I know everything. The silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold. Last chance, Lindsay. Drop this, or consider yourself no longer part of this family. I laughed bitterly. I stopped being part of this family the moment you decided my inheritance was yours to take. I hung up, hands shaking but resolve stronger than ever. The final battle was approaching, and for the first time, I believed I might actually win. The courtroom fell silent as the audio recording played. Grandma's voice, though weak, was resolute. I've told you repeatedly, Harold. The house goes to Lindsay. That's final. My father's voice came next. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The family needs. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Grandma interrupted. And Lindsay is family too, though you seem to forget that. I watched my father's face turn ashen as his own words condemned him. Jake stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. My mother dabbed at her eyes, performing grief for the judge. Catherine Reeves had tried to block the recordings as evidence, arguing they were obtained illegally. But our forensic expert had not only verified their authenticity but also confirmed the timestamps, all from before Grandma's death, all contradicting the family's claims about her changing her will. Judge Pearson's expression remained impassive throughout the proceedings, but I caught a flicker of something, disappointment, perhaps even disgust, when she looked at my family. The court will take a 30-minute recess before delivering a ruling, she announced, rising from the bench. In the hallway, Mr. Bennett squeezed my shoulder. You did well in there. Your grandmother would be proud. Across the corridor, my family huddled with Reeves, their voices low but their gestures agitated. Monroe stood apart, constantly checking his watch, already calculating his losses. When court resumed, Judge Pearson wasted no time. Having reviewed all evidence presented, this court finds that Margaret Carter's last valid will and testament is the document dated June 12 of last year, which clearly leaves the property at 1423 Maple Avenue to her granddaughter, Lindsay Carter. My breath caught in my throat as she continued. Furthermore, the clause requiring Ms. Carter's written consent for any sale is binding. The subsequent sale of the property was therefore illegal and is hereby nullified. Mr. Monroe, while I sympathize with your position as an unwitting participant in this situation, the law is clear. The property rightfully belongs to Ms. Carter. Relief crashed through me like a wave. Mr. Bennett patted my hand as Judge Pearson addressed my family directly. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice stern, the evidence strongly suggests document forgery and attempts to exert undue influence on Margaret Carter during her final months. These are serious matters that could warrant criminal charges. My father paled further. Jake's confident facade crumbled. My mother looked genuinely frightened for the first time. However, Judge Pearson continued, as Ms. Carter has not pressed such charges, the court will not pursue them at this time. But let me be very clear, this court finds your actions reprehensible. You attempted to override the clear wishes of a dying woman and deprive your daughter and sister of her rightful inheritance. She shuffled her papers, then delivered the final blow. Mr. Monroe, you may seek damages from the Carter family for fraudulent representation in the sale. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck with finality. I had won. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, shouting questions. Mr. Bennett fielded most of them, allowing me to slip away. I needed to be alone, to process everything that had happened. I drove to Grandma's house, my house now, legally and completely. The sold sign still stood in the yard, but it meant nothing now. I removed it, tossing it into the bushes with a satisfying crash. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, the house felt different, emptier without Grandma's presence, but somehow still full of her spirit. I walked through each room slowly, trailing my fingers along familiar walls, remembering. In the kitchen, where we'd baked countless pies together. In the living room, where she'd taught me to knit. Up the creaking stairs to her bedroom, where I'd sat holding her hand during those final weeks. As the afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, I sank onto the window seat overlooking the garden. The roses needed attention, pruning, watering, care, but they were still blooming defiantly. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from well-wishers who had followed my story, congratulating me on the victory. There were also missed calls from my parents and Jake, which I ignored. Just before sunset, a car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched my father approach the front door alone. His shoulders were slumped, his usual confident stride replaced by something heavier, more tentative. The doorbell rang. I considered not answering, but something, curiosity, perhaps, or the last remnant of daughterly obligation, made me open the door. Lindsay, he said, looking older than I remembered. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside silently. He stood awkwardly in the entryway, taking in the house as if seeing it for the first time. Your grandmother loved this place, he said finally. I know, I replied. That's why she left it to me. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The family business is in trouble. Monroe is suing us for the full sale amount, plus damages. Jake's investors are pulling out. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a dull sense of inevitability. That's not my concern anymore. No, he agreed quietly. I suppose it isn't. He hesitated, then added, your mother wanted me to ask if you'd consider helping us. Financially. The audacity was so breathtaking I almost laughed. Are you serious? We're still family, Lindsay. No, I said firmly. You made it very clear what family means to you, and I'm not interested in that definition anymore. He looked around the house once more, perhaps seeing the ghosts of what might have been, what should have been, a family united rather than torn apart by greed. I understand, he said finally. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? He had no answer for that. With a nod, he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Will we see you at Christmas? I thought of all the Christmases past, me on the periphery while Jake was showered with attention and gifts. The obligatory dinners where I was tolerated, not celebrated. No, I said. But Grandma's roses will be blooming by spring. You're welcome to visit them then, if you'd like. It wasn't forgiveness, I wasn't ready for that yet, but it was something. An acknowledgement that while some doors had closed forever, others might, someday, open again. On my terms. After he left, I returned to the window seat, watching as evening settled over the garden. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork to file, locks to change, a life to rebuild. I would need to talk to the hospital about my suspension, decide whether to fight that battle too or simply find a new position elsewhere. But tonight, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be still. To feel the victory, the loss, the bittersweet mixture of emotions that came with standing up for myself at the cost of family ties. I did it, Grandma, I whispered to the quiet house. Just like you taught me. As darkness fell, I moved through the rooms turning on lamps, bringing warmth and light back to spaces that had stood cold and empty for too long. In the kitchen, I found Grandma's old kettle and made a cup of tea in her favorite mug. Sitting on the porch swing, cradled by night sounds and the scent of roses, I finally felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly, but peace. This house wasn't just walls and a roof, it was Grandma's legacy of love and strength. It was home. And finally, truly, it was mine.